Welcome to I Wrote That, a podcast where we bring authors and industry experts together to talk about all things books and make the journey to authorship just a little bit easier. My name is Larissa and I am the CEO of Next Page Publishing, a hybrid publishing house where we help entrepreneurs write books to grow their businesses. Now, I'm on a mission to help aspiring authors feel like they are in control of the publishing journey and that they are supported by a team of experts who genuinely want the best for them and their books. If you are in the very beginning of your journey, or maybe you have a manuscript that you're finished and you're not sure how to get it out into the world, I encourage you to reach out to us at nextpagepublishing.net. You can schedule your free discovery call and find out how our team of experts can make your journey to being a published author easy, smooth, and successful. Now, without further ado, let's get on to our next amazing guest and make your journey to authorship a little less complicated. I want to welcome a special guest to our show today, Bret Ridgway. He is the author of 8 books, including #1 bestseller, Mistakes Authors Make, which I actually have sitting on my shelf, and The ABCs of Speaking. He was a co-founder in 2003 of Speaker Fulfillment Services, a company that provides product duplication and book fulfillment services for authors, speakers, and information marketers. He is a frequent guest on podcasts, virtual summits, and at live events on subjects related to book publishing and the speaking industries. I absolutely love when we get to bring guests in that I actually have a connection with that goes beyond the podcast. Sometimes guests come in and I don't really have a deep understanding of who they are and what they do, but Bret and I have actually had the pleasure of speaking at an event before. We spoke at Authorpreneur 101 last September-ish, and it's one of those events where you go in and the topics are magnetic. And you know that you need to have more conversations with this person because I have questions. I want to dig into certain things. And so when Bret spoke about his book, which is Mistakes Authors Make, I was like, yeah, I need that. So I actually have the copy sitting on my desk. It's on my TBR list. I'm going to read it because I see mistakes every day that authors make. I make mistakes myself as an author, but Bret has gone deep and dove into it. So welcome to the show, Bret.
Well, I'm honored to be here, Larissa. So let's hopefully share some things that will help your listeners out.
Absolutely. So, we've read your bio, we've read your introduction, but why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
It's one of those things where I never would have envisioned being where I'm at today, even a few years ago. I mean, the journey goes back to the mid 90s, even when I actually put up the first portal website in the plant engineering and maintenance industry. And I was selling back in those days. I'm going to date myself here a little bit, VHS tapes and books aimed at plant engineers, maintenance mechanics, etc. And then around the same time frame, I got a call from a guy I had a joint venture with, a guy named Carl Galletti. And Carl asked me if I would handle the back sales table at his first internet marketing conference. And that was back in 1999. I remember it well. It was at the old Las Vegas Hilton. And I hadn't been to Vegas before, so I said, hey, sounds good to me. I'll do that. And that kind of led to a side business where over the course of the next 15 years, I managed the back sales table at about 150 different events.
Wow.
So I had a unique perspective and got to meet a lot of the speakers in that space early on, 20 plus years ago. And when some of them found out I was doing product fulfillment for my own stuff, they cornered me and said, hey, Bret, will you do some fulfillment for me? And I'd been thinking about it for a while, Larissa, because it was a natural outgrowth of all the people I had gotten to know in the industry. So along with another guy, I formed a company called Speaker Fulfillment Services back in 2003. So between being in the back of the room at these events where we would collect all the money, pay the speakers, pay the promoter, and take a cut for providing the service, as well as being the fulfillment partner for these guys, seeing how they handled their launches, how they marketed their books, etc. I kind of had a unique perspective on the industry. And I was happy for the longest time being the back of the room guy. That was kind of my shtick. I'm kind of introverted naturally. But eventually I said, Bret, you need to get over that. You need to get up in front of the room and share some of what you've learned. So I did start speaking a few years ago. And it was always on behalf of the fulfillment company. It was a business building type speaking versus selling from the platform or keynoting or whatever. But that just, it expanded. And then I started my own podcast recently. And so my primary focus these days is on helping authors and other entrepreneurs who feel like they have a positive message they need to share with the world, learn how to build a speaking business based around their own particular story and expertise. So that's kind of where we got to where we are today.
You and I have a very interesting background because I also started in corporate, kind of in the maintenance world. So I'm offline. Let's have that conversation because what a transition to go from that to where we are today, which is serving authors and how do they make the most out of the business side of it and the branding side of it. Now, you asked me before we started the conversation, who are we talking to? And as I serve nonfiction authors, I primarily talk about nonfiction. And when we talk about like speaking engagements and things like it, we're talking to the nonfiction authors most of the time. Those are the people that want to build the brand around the book. But fiction authors also have a spot in this too, right? Like going to book signings and things like that, and just being comfortable talking about your book and selling your book. So when in all your years of watching speakers, what's kind of like the number one thing that stood out to you that makes a good like keynote speech or a podcast interview? What's one thing that you have consistently seen?
Well, the person who succeeds at this very well is the person who really tunes in on what the pain points of their audience are. Whether they're one speaker at a multi-speaker event or they're going into keynote for a corporation or whatever, they really take the time to do their homework and dive into what is this group really bringing me in for to help them solve. And so you have some speakers, Larissa, that it's like, I'm going to do the same speech every time. I don't care hell or high water. And other people, it's like, I'm going to customize this as much as possible for the audience to truly try to address their pain points. And it's the latter, I think, that really succeeds and has a longer term success in the industry.
I love that you said that. You couldn't see me behind the screen, but I was like, yes, of course, absolutely. Because I had someone the other day ask me, what's your keynote speech? Like, what's the title of it? And I was like, it's evergreen. It is always changing because the audience is always changing. I have never gone to two events that have the exact same audience. One, because the times change. What was relevant this year was not relevant last year. AI, for example, has
Mm-hmm.
exploded. So as a publisher, that is, the topic that might want to be talked about. Work-life balance, those are the conversations that, 3, 4, 5 years ago, people weren't talking about. If you don't have an evergreen speech, like something that you can constantly update and revise and build that into your speaking career, I agree they fall flat and people don't invite you back.
It's also important to remember that any speech you develop needs to be what I would call modular in nature, because you never know when you go into a speaking engagement whether you're going to have 30 minutes, 45, an hour, are you doing a 2 hour talk, whatever. So you've got to know what stories you can add in or subtract, what interactive activities you can insert or take out, depending on how long you have with that particular audience.
Yeah. I think that's really important because I'll share a little bit of a personal story on that note. I went into a group of people. It was a group of clients for another coach, and she's like, hey, you have 60 minutes, like let's have a really deep conversation about how you can make a business out of having a book. And I was like, awesome. And so we had the most fire 60 minutes. It had exactly everything you were talking about. It had interactive moments, it had reflection, I had people crying, like it was just the bee's knees. And she came to me afterwards and she's like, great, can you do that in 30 minutes at this event? And I was like, no, I cannot get the same reaction in 30 minutes. So I love that you said that because you do have to be adaptable as a speaker. Very, very much. So let's talk about authors. Obviously, that's who's listening to this podcast, or people that want to be authors. A lot of times, actually, I want to mention two things. You talked about your history of kind of the sit back and watch for years and how that led you to taking the stage. And I think that's really important for authors too, of the sit back and watch. Some of the most successful authors I've seen, and I see it in your book, Mistakes Authors Make, it is a sit back and watch what the industry is doing, what the market is doing, what your ideal customers are doing, and then respond. But there's this very fine art of don't wait too long. Because again, what you're seeing 5, 10 years ago might not be relevant when you write the book. And so I think that's really important that you mentioned that of just the experience of understanding what's going on so that you can write a fire book. Like any comments on that?
Well, as you said, the audience or the industry is always changing, and I think the biggest lesson that I could suggest to somebody here is in order to be able to do that and make sure that you're not writing something that's obsolete before it gets to the printer or whatever, is that you are keeping up with what's going on in the industry. And that is by being actively involved in networking and participating in events. Now, live events are starting to come back, but it's the people that you meet at live events, at summits, that will become your biggest cheerleaders and your biggest JV partners at some point in time if you have a need for that. And you're only going to really stay in tune with the industry by being out in the industry. So even if you're not a speaker on a summit, you better attend some summits and be seen. If you're going to be involved in networking events, which you should be, I mean, you can't do them all. You got to pick and choose your battles, but you need to be involved in networking events so you're seen out there and people recognize you for your expertise and the value that you bring. And it's in those circles where you're going to find out what the latest and the greatest is and making sure that you're staying as current as possible with what's going on. Now, we all know that there is a lead time between the writing of a book and it getting to the market. So, I mean, you got to be very careful about that fine line between, putting something out there that's old before it's new. But, it's getting involved and staying involved and getting to know others in the industry that you can have the conversations with that will share what's working, what's not working, etc., that then you can, put into your book or whatever at the appropriate time.
Yeah. And I want to take a second for tangible tip for my aspiring authors out there. Nothing dates your book faster than links that don't work or events that have passed. So for example, you can say like, oh, I'm getting ready to speak at this event in 2023. 12 months later, your book is irrelevant because people have not irrelevant. That's maybe a harsh way of saying it, but it is dated. All of a sudden you start to question everything that's in the book because it has a timestamp and you're like, is this really relevant anymore? As a reader, we ask those questions, right? Like we want to read relevant stuff that we feel like has been published on the cusp of change, on the cusp of revelation in our industry. So watch out for those links. I have had so many authors are like, oh, I really want to put a link to an external source. If you don't control that source, do not include that link. And don't include specific events that are upcoming or like, last month I attended this event. Well, in a year, that's going to be quite outdated. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree. And it's important, I think, if you're going to drive people to a website, make sure that it's an evergreen page that they're going to. So if you are going to be offering events on a regular basis, well, just in your book say, for my latest workshop, go to this website. And then that's the page that you update. And so the book is always current, but where you're going to is what you need to be updating them with the current information.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's totally wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to take a quick break and hop to a commercial, but in the back end of this conversation, you're not going to want to miss it because we hit on some really important topics for the authors. Hey, aspiring author. Have you been exploring the idea of adding a book to your business and creating a step in your funnel that moves you from the free offer to that high ticket program that you have? You need a low ticket offer. And I'm talking between $3 and $20 that your audience can consume on their term and is in a format that they trust. And who doesn't trust a good book? Now, the trick becomes creating the content that actually converts into your high ticket offer. This is where Auth comes in. At the heart of the Auth event, we're helping aspiring authors with the basics. One is nailing down the art of writing that 5-star read. And we're creating the plan for how to make it successful. You can't just write a book. You have to market it. You have to know how to use it. You have to build it into your funnels. It's happening on March 18th. So secure your spot today. Head on down. You can click that link. It's right below here and prepare for a day of unparalleled inspiration and actionable insights. I'll see you there. All right, let's hop back into our interview with Bret and get to the nitty-gritty of all the good stuff that authors are making mistakes, and it's a conversation you're going to need to know about. Now, we talked about networking and we talked about being seen and getting out there so that you do become a face of expertise in whatever your niche is. I find a lot of times authors, I see this a lot with the people that come through my coaching programs, is they start thinking, like they come into me thinking they know what their niche is and what their area of expertise is, and they come out the other end different and changed, right? Because writing a book changes you. It changes your perspective on things. It changes your level of knowledge on things. It changes the level that you understand who you're writing to. So what advice do you have for the people that have been maybe speaking for a couple of years? They write a book and all of a sudden their perspective is different. Have you seen speakers come back with a different perspective on things? Like, do you have anything to add there?
Now, I don't know if there's so much a different perspective as opposed to speakers who totally change their niche. So, in one moment they're known as the teleseminar guy, and then they have to reinvent themselves because teleseminars go away and becomes webinars. And so now they're the webinar guy, or maybe they're the book tour guy, the virtual book tour guy, or whatever. So they're constantly having to reinvent themselves as the market changes. And that can be hard to do. So you got to be very careful about where you want to plant your flag as to what niche you're serving. And yeah, you got to be adaptable and you got to change and all that. And you can succeed at that change, but I've also seen people totally fail at trying to make that change. I mean, they were known as an internet guy, internet marketing person, and then they tried to position themselves as a what's the word I'm looking for? Motivational speaker, improve your life type thing, and it just didn't fly whatsoever. It was a miserable failure because in the mind of the marketplace out there, they were an internet marketing person. And so that drastic shift in terms of who they wanted to serve did not fly because they had totally stamped themselves in one niche and couldn't make that transition in the mind of the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and couldn't or didn't give it enough not resources, but like give it the credit that's due, if that makes sense. Of like, this isn't just because I have a brand doesn't mean I'm going to be able to build another one seamlessly. It is going to probably take as much time, if not more, to rebrand myself because I have to work against already existing assumptions of who I am and what I do. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you're not starting with a blank sheet of paper. You're starting with a sheet of paper that's already got a bunch of things written on it that you've got to figure out how you're going to counteract that in some way. And
Exactly.
not easy
Yeah,
to
very,
do.
very interesting. I found that when I moved from sci-fi to nonfiction, how did I was still an author. I still had the credibility of being able to go through the marketing, the publishing, the editing, all of the hardships that every author pretty much has to go through. But how do I rebrand as a nonfiction, an expert in nonfiction? And one of the biggest things is learn through doing, make the leap, get the experience, practice, and show up. Like you said, the networking, show up.
I have a question for you, Larissa. So, since you have served totally different markets in the book space, have you ever done publish under one name for a certain niche and under a different name for another niche? Because I know people that do that.
Um, you know, in hindsight, I almost wish I had. I do have some nonfiction pieces that I want to publish that could be deemed as quite sensitive, and I don't want to offend anybody in my family or in my close circles, but I have things that I feel like need to be said, and I don't want to wait until someone dies to publish them. And not that it's bad, not that I'm defaming anybody or saying bad things, but it's just calling attention to certain things that I wish had gone differently. And I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And so I do see pen names in my future. That's such an interesting question. The only thing that holds me back is suddenly I have to manage two brands.
Sure.
I have to manage the marketing for that pen name. I already have the pen name picked out. It's penciled out. It's on my wall of like who I'm going to be. But then I also have to manage the brand of Larissa Sohan and Next Page Publishing and all of these things. And so I've interviewed people that author under pen names before, and they're like, "Oh, it's easy." And I was like, "Nothing about split personality sounds easy to me."
Yeah, I agree.
What about you? You've authored 8 books. Anytime you've written under a pen name?
No, they're all nonfiction books aimed at speakers, authors, information marketers, event promoters, in that whole expert space. So there's never been a need in my particular case to consider a pen name.
Yeah, very on brand stuff. Yeah.
So much so, yes.
Yeah. Okay. I want to ask, you had a very interesting question when you filled out your application that I have. What are the pros and cons of selling your book on Amazon? Now, I'm interested in particular in that question because that is the publishing platform that I use primarily. I have dabbled in other ones such as Ingram Spark. I've looked at Lulu. I've looked at a couple of that do different binding styles, but Amazon is the monopoly when it comes to out there. So I would love to hear from your perspective, mostly the cons, because I understand what the pros are. I know that they have amazing shipping times. The print quality is really good. The prices are like, you can't beat them. But what are the cons?
Well, the biggest con, in my opinion, Larissa, is if you are a person who has any kind of platform whatsoever, and let's say you're doing speaking, well, out of a speaking engagement, you're going to try to drive them to your site or whatever to purchase whatever it may be that you have. And if you drive them to Amazon, well, it's Amazon's customer, it's not your customer. So you're not building your list, your names. So that's the biggest negative, number one. Number two is if you have additional products or services that you're offering, if you're doing your own selling, then however you're fulfilling your books, whether it's for yourself or via a fulfillment house, then you have the ability to insert extra marketing materials along with that book shipment. So you can, promote your other courses or other books or whatever it may be. And you lose that ability with Amazon because it's their customer and they're going to ship the book out and all that. Then thirdly is honestly, if you can, in my opinion, if you are speaking for the platform and you are driving them to Amazon to buy your book, you're nuts. Not only for the two reasons that we mentioned, but also you'll make a lot more per book selling it yourself than selling it via Amazon, because Amazon's going to take their 45 or 55% cut, and it's just one of those things where there are pros and cons, and you got to decide what works best for you. Amazon is great. You certainly should be selling your book on Amazon. I mean, they're the 800-pound gorilla in the marketplace. But if you have that platform and you're driving your traffic to Amazon, I think that's a mistake for the reasons that we mentioned.
Mhm.
So, yes, I sell my books on Amazon, but if anytime I have the opportunity to speak to somebody, I'm going to suggest they go get to my site to get an author signed copy
Mhm.
and then, get it from there. So that's why I think there are some negatives to Amazon, although I'm certainly not going to stop selling my book on Amazon.
It is. And what has also really bugged me about Amazon, to the point where I threw a little hissy fit and did pull my books down for a little while, is the exclusivity behind Amazon, especially if you want to be in Kindle Unlimited. Readers expect, especially those that are avid readers that are reading a lot of nonfiction books a year and they are enrolled in Kindle Unlimited, they won't buy your book if you're not in Kindle Unlimited. But as brand makers, as somebody who wants to be able to freely distribute my book because it's my content and I own it and I should have that right, I cannot enroll in Kindle Unlimited and do that. I cannot give away free e-copies of my book. I cannot list it on my site. And that has always really, really bugged me. And I'm hoping there's a shift coming in Amazon. I highly doubt there is, but I'm hoping. Like, why can't I hope? That puts the power back in authors' hands. And that is the entire motto of my brand is if we as authors didn't give them our content, they would have nothing. And I don't think they respect that relationship enough, or that ability. I do also want to say, I know you're in the US and I'm in Canada. Managing shipping for me, how much does it on average cost for you to ship a book?
Most people ship books via media mail these days, and last I knew it was, and I haven't looked at it in a while, honestly, Larissa. It was $6 or something like that to ship
Yeah.
a book media mail.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's nothing inexpensive about international shipping. You're gonna spend $20 minimum to ship a book to Canada,
Yeah.
and more elsewhere in the world. So if you are if you have a big audience in a particular country, then you need to figure out how you're going to print and ship from that country
Mm-hmm.
for the people in that particular region. Because yeah, I mean, nobody wants to buy a book for $15 and spend $45 on shipping costs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, shipping is not in our favor. That's exactly what I was going to say too. I send out a lot of copies of my book as thank you to hosts and things like that, or potential clients of like, hey, here's a copy of my book. But like you said, it's like the $6 to $20 range to ship a book, depending on where it goes. So I mean, the profit at each way, your profit really, really quick, but it depends on what the goal of sending the book is. For me, A lot of the times it's to acquire additional speaking engagements, which are priceless, in my opinion. It's to thank hosts for their time, which again, they give us a lot of time and they deserve our thanks. Or it's to sign, high ticket clients. And so to eat that $12 cost is not a big deal. But if you don't have if it's not a system in your funnel, like you don't know what the end goal of sending that book is, then yeah, you do want to be wary of how fast shipping can accumulate, because it is astronomical.
Yeah, I sent out, 20 copies of one of my books a couple months ago, and it cost me like $215 to send out 20 books. It's like, all right, there's a marketing expense, but
Yeah, and it is, right? If you have the budget for it, and if you have the end goal of what you want those 20 books to do for you, then it might very well be worth it. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Bret, that is all the questions I have, except for my favorite one, which is, what advice do you have for aspiring authors?
I think the biggest advice I would have for aspiring authors is to remember that while we all want to be New York Times bestsellers, those are few and far between. You got to remember that the book is the entree into your world, and it's the piece that will lead them to other things that you have, your higher ticket products and services. And so make sure that that book is as much of a marketing tool for you as it possibly can be. You've got to have bounce backs in your book to drive them from the book to your website so that they can get other things from you, but then you can capture their name and email to market other things to them. But remember, first and foremost, the money's not in the book. The money is typically in the products and services beyond the book.
I love that, because I met with a woman the other day and she's like, well, I'm not publishing a book unless you promise me ROI. And I was like, doesn't work that way. I can't promise you anything, but it is truly the setup in the systems. It's not the book that's going to make you hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's how you leverage the book and what you do with it after the book has hit the reader's hands. That is where the gold is. I love that. Thank you very much. Okay. Do you have any freebies or anything you want to offer to our listeners?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, Larissa, my primary focus these days is on helping authors and entrepreneurs who have a message they want to share with the world learn how to launch a speaking career the right way. So I would invite any of the listeners to go to bretridgway.com, and that's Bret with one T and Ridgway without an E. But on that page, you'll find a special report there called 3 Key Things Entrepreneurs Must Master to Build a Profitable Speaking Business. And I would encourage you to hop on over there, grab that copy, and then let me know if I can help you in any other way.
Absolutely. And we are going to put those links minus the T and the E in the bottom underneath in the show notes. So you can go ahead and you click that link. Thank you so much, Bret. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of I Wrote That. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to our show so you don't miss any of our upcoming guests. And if this has led you to some inspiration to want to get started on your own authorship journey, whether you just have an idea or you have a manuscript that you're ready to publish, reach out to us at nextpagepublishing.net, and we will match you up with our team of experts to make the journey simple, easy, and smooth.